SmartB Sports Update Podcast is brought to you by Optimum CBD. For all your rest and recovery needs, CBD products are your best bet. Go to optimumcbd.store to order now. Free delivery on all orders over $99. You must be over 18 to order. I use Optimum CBD products personally for my rest and recovery. I train 6 days a week in Jiu-Jitsu, as you've probably heard on the SmartB Sports Update Podcast. I teach, I train, I compete. And without Optimum CBD products, I wouldn't be able to do it. Optimum CBD for all your rest and recovery needs.
Another day, another Gorden Tallis spray on Michael Maguire or hostility towards Michael Maguire, but we'll get to that in a second.
And how are you today, Dan?
Yeah, good, thanks, John. The off season has started, but you wouldn't know it. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of rugby league news around, and the Pacific Championship to get underway on Friday night.
It's a Friday night?
Yes.
Oh, God. So it's in New Zealand, right? It's in New Zealand and in Australia, yeah?
So the Kangaroos are playing Tonga at Suncorp Stadium on Friday night, and then Fiji are playing PNG on Saturday night in Suva. And so that tournament will run through until November 10. I just thought, seeing as it's the off-season's just started, might just have a quick look at the sport coming up over the summer. So we're certainly not short on major sport. As I said, Pacific Championships run from this Friday night through until November 10. And then we get into the cricket, that huge 5-test series between Australia and India getting underway on November 22 in Perth. That 5-test series runs through until January 7, finishing with the New Year's Test in Sydney. It'll be the first time since 91-92 these two teams have met in a 5-test series, so certainly looking forward to that. And then once that's done, we'll run right into the Australian Open Tennis. That'll be January 12 to January 26, with that whole month of January with the lead-up events to that as well. And then once that's all done and dusted, we'll just about be ready to get back into the football season.
Football will start in February.
Yes.
But that India test is really interesting, the series, because India is obviously, on a tear since they've won the T20 World Cup. It's the number one ranked men's test team versus the number 2 ranked men's test team.
Well done on getting the men's in there.
Yeah, you've got to put it in, otherwise,
You're in all sorts of trouble if you don't.
Blah blah. We can mention the women's. What's the women's? I don't know. I don't even know how to look it up, to be honest.
But yeah, I mean that's going to be a big series. I'm really looking forward to that. Of course, India won the last 2 series out here in Australia, so. Plenty to prove for Australia, plenty to play for. They'll want to win that series against India here after losing the last couple.
Yeah, and India are basically the only test series that give Australia a danger for losing, So it's
out here,
going to be
definitely
so intriguing and such a good summer of cricket, actually. All the Indian people I know are super pumped and already got their tickets to basically every single test match. Going to test cricket is a hard slog. You need to have 5 days off work. Up to 5 days off work.
Tough to get those days off.
And it's, I don't know if I told you this story before, like one of my mates used to work at a hospital, and there was a couple of English doctors when the English cricket team came out, and they cathetered themselves, so they would have a bag so they wouldn't have to go to the toilet, and then every morning before the test, before they'd go to the cricket ground, they'd come into the hospital and give themselves a bag of an IV bag to rehydrate for the drinking and stuff like that.
Oh wow!
So obviously, we don't condone that kind of behaviour. But when you got a crazy, like if you think English people are bad with the cricket, the Indian's gonna make it. It's gonna be like Indian home games every game that. That's the way it works,
And the good news is, even if we do lose the series this summer, England will be coming out for the Ashes next summer, and we'll win that. So
100%. There's no danger there. That's one of those ones like when Bangladesh comes out or something like that. Who's worse than England? I've still got it open right now. England's still ranked number 3 in tests.
It's because they've just come off a home summer and won at home. That's why.
Yeah, but against who? That's one of the things about cricket, right? You can just play a bunch of teams and get your points up, and then it keeps you.
It favours the home in general. There's exceptions to the rule, but in general, it favours the home team too much in Test cricket, and it's a real issue for cricket. A bit too predictable and too much in favour of the home side in Test cricket.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why this India coming is so intriguing, because they're one team that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good. Yeah. I'm glad, Australia wins too often out here. We're not challenged enough out here. So to finally have a team that's actually won series the last couple of times they've come out here. That first series they won against us, that was when Smith and Warner were suspended. So, but then, they proved it wasn't a fluke, because they did it again with those players coming back in the last time. So... Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus the changing of the guard in tennis when we get to the Australian Open.
Yes.
There's quite a few actually. There's quite a few really good mixed martial arts cards coming up over apparently the 45th return of Conor McGregor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, right. The Logan Paul versus Mike Tyson is in November.
Oh, so that's actually... I thought it got cancelled.
It got postponed, and we'll see if it actually happens. I love watching
that one.
Yeah, I love all these people who look at it and go, Mike Tyson's going to murder him and stuff. But everybody remembers Mike Tyson from the 80s, the 90s, where he would literally murder people. If they didn't pull him off, they would. But it doesn't matter what you do. He's 60. But it is really, I really love one of the stories that Joe Rogan tells us. The reason the table in the Joe Rogan podcast is so big is because of Mike Tyson. The first time he had him on was when Mike Tyson was all a stoner, really hardcore. He's still really hardcore into weed, but relaxed Mike Tyson and everything was fine. But the second time was when Mike Tyson was scheduled to fight Roy Jones Jr. and Joe Rogan was like, it's too scary, need to make the table bigger. So there is still that element of, it is Mike Tyson. Yeah. But, he's fighting a guy 30 years his junior, and he is 60, so almost 60. So, the internet's going to have a field day with that. Almost 60. Yeah, so... Yeah,
I was reading that, talk of Joe Rogan, I was reading that Trump might actually finally be going on his podcast. For sure,
because Donald Trump's currently... Donald Trump. He's doing a whole bunch of podcasts. He's been on Theo Von, he's been on... Lex Friedman. It's really interesting to listen to those podcasts, because when a person goes on a bunch of podcasts on a tour, it's just the same podcast over and over and over again with a different host. But Donald Trump, it's just random. So it'll be good. I'm pumped for it. I've been listening to a few of those Donald Trump podcasts, and I'm like,
I'll be watching that. If Joe Rogan has him on, I'll be watching that one.
I just wanted to ask about aliens. But onto rugby league and Gorden Tallis and the Michael Maguire. I was going to say feud. But the one-way level of hatred continues. Yes. I don't know what Michael Maguire did to Gorden Tallis. He must have slapped his mother or something. I don't know. But obviously Gorden Tallis. Well, it's a funny thing, right? Because they keep approaching Gorden Tallis about the Broncos, but Gorden Tallis works for the Titans. Yeah, and he calls himself a Titan now. If you say to him, "Would you have any time?" A number of times on NRL 360, he said, "Look, no, I'm a Titan now. I'm not a Bronco." So he regards himself as a Titan, despite being a club legend at the Broncos. So I think there was a recent quote where he said if the Broncos should lose his number anyway. So I don't know why everyone keeps bringing up Michael Maguire, the Broncos coach, to Gorden Tallis, but that's for the clickbait. Yeah, but he's had another dig at Michael Maguire, saying he'd refuse to sit down for a coffee with him. Yeah, so Gorden Tallis gave Michael Maguire a spray on grand final day on Triple M, and as if that wasn't enough, they actually bumped into each other at the grand final. So we were actually talked about that spray last week that he gave him on Triple M. But now this is a further development to this story. So the pair ran into each other at that Storm Panthers grand final. Maguire went up to Tallis and said, "Look, we should catch up for a coffee." Tallis said,
I don't drink coffee. And then he went on to say, look, I don't need to be friends with any coach. I never caught up with Kevy. I don't catch up with Des Hasler, the Titans coach, even though he's involved with the Titans. And I never caught up with Justin Holbrook. What I say is just my opinion. It's not an opinion on behalf of the Broncos old boys. No one tells me what to say. I'm paid to give my opinion. And when I'm asked, I'm just going to give my honest thoughts. He's not asking to be friends with him. He just asked to catch up for a coffee, and he won't even catch up for a coffee. What a nasty thing to do, to knock back somebody who, in good faith, a well-meaning gesture. Oh, how about we catch up for a coffee, Gordy? No, I don't drink coffee. What a petulant display yet again from Gorden Tallis.
I think that kind of shows that Gorden Tallis is admitting his opinion comes from complete ignorance. Obviously, Gorden Tallis has been outspoken about Michael Maguire and everything, and we don't want a New South Wales coaching a Queensland team, even though New South Wales coaches often coach other Queensland teams. But he's, I just give my opinion. I talk about my opinion. It's my opinion. No one else is giving me these lines. I don't speak on behalf of the Broncos. This is my opinion. Well, if you want to have a proper opinion, you should probably sit down and talk to the guy and form a real opinion. But what you're talking about, Gordon, you've just admitted completely, Gorden Tallis, that your opinion of Michael Maguire comes from complete ignorance. You don't even know the guy, obviously. So, obviously we don't know Gorden Tallis and we have our opinions of him. But if Gorden Tallis asks us, do you want to sit down to form a better opinion or get a more knowledgeable opinion or have, gain some insight into him and his thoughts and stuff like that, we'd do it.
Yeah, he should come on the podcast. Yeah. Come on, talk to us.
Because then we would be able to speak from a better place of knowledge. Right now all we have is what we see in the media and Gorden Tallis having little tanties and hating on Michael Maguire for no reason.
Yeah, and he, as I said, he often says on NRL 360, I'm a Titan now. So the Broncos should just... He's wiped the Broncos, so the Broncos should just wipe him and not care what he thinks then.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like they didn't because they hired Michael Maguire anyway.
Yeah, well, I think there's two reasons why Gorden Tallis just can't stand Michael Maguire. The first one is, we all remember that Origin series this year where New South Wales beat Queensland. Maguire and Tallis engaged in a war of words in the media, and Maguire had the last laugh, made a fool of Gorden Tallis, and we all remember that NRL's 360 episode after the series where there was you could cut the tension with a knife that was in the air when they went face to face with each other on that show. Very, very awkward. So Maguire got one up on him there, and now Maguire's taken the job of one of his good mates, Kevin Walters. So I think Gorden Tallis has just gone, well, I'm going to give it to this bloke at every opportunity. He's got a chip on both shoulders when it comes to Michael Maguire.
I think it's going to be really funny during the season when if Broncos are going well and Gorden Tallis won't eat his own words, won't backtrack on anything he said, and I can't wait for the press conferences where they ask Michael Maguire about whatever Gorden Tallis says each week. Because
well, we know that's just going to be an ongoing battle next year.
And Michael Maguire's a pretty funny guy.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for this.
And look, it won't surprise me. No doubt Gorden Tallis will be... Well, he says he's not a Bronco, he's a Titan now. I reckon Gorden Tallis will be hoping that the Broncos fail and that they go worse than they went under Kevin Walters, because he won't want it to reflect well on Michael Maguire. Interestingly, the Broncos are now third favourites to win the premiership next year with the bookies. Now, if you can believe that, it's quite extraordinary.
That's bizarre.
Now, that would not be happening if Kevin Walters was still the coach. If Kevin Walters was still... That clearly that's a reaction from the bookies to Michael Maguire being appointed the coach. If Kevin Walters was still the coach, there's no way they'd be third favourites to win the premiership. I checked a couple of bookmaker websites and that was the case. So, the bookmakers clearly don't agree with Gorden Tallis. They clearly think the Broncos are going to be much better off with Michael Maguire than they would have been with Kevin Walters. If Kevin Walters had still been the coach, they probably wouldn't have even been favoured to make the top 8 next year, the Broncos, let alone be the third favourite to win the premiership.
Yeah, it's definitely not because Corey Oates retired.
Yeah.
Like, Broncos have signed no one. Like, signed no new players. They've just re-signed Ezra Mam, Brendan Piakura, Adam Reynolds, Jordan Ricky, Tyson Smoothie, Billy Walters.
So that clearly the bookies think that this year was all to do with Walters, and that the Broncos under Michael Maguire are going to turn it around, and they're obviously looking closely at that 2023 season where they went within a whisker of winning that premiership, only for Nathan Cleary to snatch the premiership trophy out of their hands.
Yeah, that's really telling. Third favourites is crazy.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's a bit much. I think I'd tip them to make the 8 now with Maguire there, but to say that they're third favourites, I wouldn't have them as third favourites.
No. But we'll do our top 8 at the beginning of next year and see how we go.
That's always fun.
The Vic Sophia sponsored SmartB Sports update top 8. It's the ladder. What is it? 17. Yeah, 17 teams. For the year, we'll also make Gowie and Piercy to do theirs. And other people can make fun of them too.
Yeah, that'll be fun. But I mean, Gorden Tallis can't have it both ways. If he says he's a Titan now, well, fair enough. But don't go around talking like you're a Broncos old boy anymore. Then he can't have it both ways. If he's a Titan, he's a Titan.
That guy's
but the Broncos should, and Michael Maguire and the Broncos should stop seeking his approval now. He said that he's a Titan.
Weird.
And you go, all right, well, you're a Titan now, so see you later. We don't want anything to do with you.
That guy's a St. George Dragon, not a... I notice he never gives his opinion on the Dragons.
Yeah, I can only think he didn't spend long there, so maybe...
5 years, but he had to sit out a year.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Because of douchebaggery. Every Dragon forever is going to hate him, so yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, I can't wait for the year because I can't wait for, especially if the Broncos go well. There's going to be a lot of comments. Gorden Tallis is going to have his comments. He's going to, try and take it away from Michael Maguire continually.
I want the Broncos to go well because I want to see a red-faced Gorden Tallis on NRL 360 every week.
NRL 360, Gorden Tallis will make a comment in the press conference next week. I'll ask Michael Maguire about that comment.
It's going to be our lead item every week next 100%. Season. What Gorden Tallis says about Michael Maguire this week. It appears
as Gorden Tallis has taken Latrell Mitchell's space for the most talked about guy on the podcast. But another friend of the podcast, Corey Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Negative himself. I don't know. This is a kind of a good story, to be honest. Like, he's... Obviously, Corey Parker is a Bronco man. He only played for the Broncos. Mm-hmm. I think it was more than 300 games, right?
I think so. I'm going to check that now.
It was 347 games.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of games. So he's criticised, hit back at the criticism of the Broncos for not showing enough respect to Kevin Walters.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to agree with him on this one, first time ever. Because, obviously it's the rumour mill and what you get, but, what was talked about in the media is there was a review of the year to do with Kevin Walters. A lot of the review came out about Kevin Walters' training methods. Now, I saw in the media they were like, and the player feedback was anonymous and it was done on a MailChimp survey. Like, yeah, who cares what it was done on, what platform you use? MailChimp survey, whatever it's called, SurveyMonkey. Which is owned by MailChimp. SurveyMonkey is the number one survey platform in the world. It doesn't matter how you do your survey.
Yeah.
And anonymous feedback, 360-degree feedback in a business is often the best kind.
Yeah, because that's the only way you're going to get an honest response. If they're forced to put their name to it, they're not going to give you an honest response.
Exactly. Many years ago, 20 years ago, we had to do an anonymous 360-degree staff review, right? And everyone in the businesses, it was for a small college I worked at, everyone in the business got very good reviews except for the CEO. They got hammered, right? So they came out and they ran a staff meeting that said, I think you guys didn't understand the questions. And then made everyone, instead of doing a computer-based anonymous survey, everyone had to handwrite their surveys and put their name on it. And suddenly, everything was fine. The CEO was great. And then they said, it had a meeting, it's like, so now I know that everyone understood it. No. Because it was anonymous, we were comfortable in speaking our minds. And I know we do rail against anonymity on the internet. But it's a different thing. Like, this has enabled the players to speak their mind. And so Kevin Walters was given this review and said, like, this is what the players said. They're a little bit unhappy with it. And apparently he had a conniption and yelled at everyone and screamed and abused everyone in the room. And that was the thing.
That's the thing. That's what tipped it over the edge. Yeah. If he hadn't have snapped at them after the review, they may not have sacked him on the spot. They may have... And... when I had Craig Gower on a couple of weeks ago, we had him on here, he made the really good point of, that's a joke if they give him 6 or 7 rounds. You either give him the year or you don't.
Yeah.
100%. He was 100% right. So, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you got to make a call. You make a call now. Why let it run its course? But if he hadn't have snapped at them, that they may have given him more time, but he lost the plot at them, and then that they were given no choice.
So he was re-signed this year. It's still 2024, right? Yeah.
Yes.
He was re-signed this year. And then we discussed a few weeks ago that we would assume that next year they would be reviewing it if the Broncos are going as bad around round 12, 13, halfway through the year.
Yeah.
The Broncos would then make a decision. It wouldn't be based on, the nonsense that, like, you and Cowie were talking about was at the beginning of the year, the club says you got until round 6 to sort your stuff out. That's ridiculous. But around 12 or 13, every club looks at their coach and then their status and says, what is the issue here, right?
Yeah.
So if Kevin Walters had been able to pass the review and say, like, all right, I've taken on board these review things and maybe I do need to make some changes, then they would have been, all right, let's see how you go next year. We'll go. It's just normal. But instead it was like a big conniption and they were like, dude.
And that's the thing. I mean, this was a team that made the grand final in 2023 and finished 12th in 2024. What more evidence do you need that it's a team on the slide? What are you going to do? Wait until round 12 next year for them to slide even further? And then you lose another year. So it was the right decision to make a call now. They've made the call. As Corey Parker said, it's not personal. It's a cutthroat business. If you're not getting results, well, you have to move on. The reality is they missed the finals in 3 out of the 4 seasons he was there. That's not good enough for a star-studded roster like the Broncos. That's not a good enough return. And I agree with the decision to move him on. I think it was the right decision. I think they're going to have a much better season next year. I don't know about 3rd, as the bookies think. But I certainly think they're not going to be finishing 12th.
No, they're
going to improve on that.
They're definitely taking someone's spot in the 8.
100%.
And I based on Michael Maguire, people will forget Michael Maguire because in sport people only remember last week, basically. But people remember Michael Maguire as the guy that coached at the Tigers, and the Tigers went really poorly, right? But that's every coach. People forget Ivan Cleary was at the Tigers and the Tigers went really poorly.
We know that the coach isn't the problem at the Tigers because they've been through so many of them.
Ivan Cleary was at the Tigers.
Yeah.
And he couldn't improve them. So I expect, we always talk about, last 2 years we've talked about there are teams in the 8 that are there just making up numbers, and this year it was mainly the Knights, like they scraped in. I think the Broncos, I expect next year the Broncos will deserve to be in the 8. I can't see them being, 3rd favourites or whatever.
No.
I can't see them winning a premiership, but I would expect, based on Michael Maguire's ability to coach, they would deserve to be in the 8. They'll play really well. That's my expectation.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a spot for them in the bottom half of that top 8 next year. And when we do our pre-season predictions, as we will for next season, I'm going to have them in my top 8.
Yeah, I think they'll be like, last year we didn't think the Bulldogs would make the 8. Throughout the year we realised they were a genuine top 8 contender. They weren't a premiership contender. They were a genuine top 8 contender. And that was it. Like, I think the Broncos will be like that. Whereas you have the other flip side of it, where nobody ever thought, even throughout the Sharks were a genuine top 8 contender. They managed to get to the top 4. But I expect right now, as of now, with the signing of Michael Maguire, and it's not 1st of November yet, so you don't know who's going to get what. I expect just solely based on that Michael Maguire that the Broncos will perform well next year and deserve to be in the top 8.
Yeah, well, the Bulldogs finished 3rd last in 2023, finished 6th in 2024. And you can see the Broncos, after finishing 12th in 2024, I think they're going to have a similar sort of turnaround in 2025.
And based on Kevin Walters' record, I didn't see it. You know? I know they made the grand final last year, 1 year ago.
Yes.
But based on this year and the previous 2 years before that, I didn't see it. You know? So I think Corey Parker is correct. 100% correct.
There's no way knowing that they would be third favourites with bookmakers if Kevin Walters was still the coach.
No, they'd be way down.
No way. Again, they probably wouldn't even be expected to make the 8.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If they hadn't have sacked Kevin Walters, I was going to have him out of the 8 next year. Again, based on player movements. 1st of November, we'll see when the agents start
and that's the thing, as you pointed out, there hasn't been much movement on the recruitment front with them. The only thing that's changed is the coach. Yeah. And that's been enough for the bookmakers to go, oh, gee, Broncos, we're putting you as third favourites.
Because they're going to take that team that is already very good, already has a lot of superstars, already has some good old heads, Adam Reynolds. Yeah. And he's going to be able to turn them around.
He's going to give a hard edge to players like Reece Walsh. And look, I know Reece Walsh is a superstar of the game. But if there's one knock on Reece Walsh, it's probably that maybe at times he's got a bit too much sort of swagger about him. Like we saw that footage of him going into last year's grand final with the sunglasses on and the shirt unbuttoned, walking around like he owned the joint. And it didn't look too good after Penrith snatched the premiership trophy out of their hands later on in the evening. Another thing about Reece Walsh, he does have quite a lot of errors in his game as well. And so that's one knock on him is I'd go, well, that huge price tag that he's on, that huge salary he's on, are they really factoring in the number of errors that he's making? I don't know if they are. But you'd think that Michael Maguire's hard edge will be just what Reece Walsh needs, and he will tidy Reece Walsh up.
Well, that was the Wayne Bennett. I think Michael Maguire is like the Wayne Bennett style coach. There was this funny story Wendell Saylor told it when he was at the Dragons, where there was footage on the Channel 9 coverage or whatever before the game where Wendell Saylor's listening to his iPhone and dancing, and the Dragons lost the game. And all that happened, all that Wayne Bennett said to Wendell Saylor was like, he left a note on his locker that said, less dancing, more winning. So that's the kind of thing that Michael Maguire will do. It'll be less swagger, less errors, more winning, you know? Like, so, I think Corey Parker is fully right.
And it's not just Corey Parker who's had a bit to say about Kevin Walters either. Broncos legend and board member Darren Lockyer had a bit to say as well. Lockyer said the club's hierarchy was alarmed at how far the side had fallen in the last 12 months. They felt it was not acceptable considering how much star power at the club. So Gorden Tallis can bang on all he likes, but when you got people like Broncos legends like Corey Parker and Darren Lockyer coming out and saying, look, it wasn't good enough, it wasn't acceptable, you know, he's a good bloke and everything, it's not personal, but we weren't getting results, so we had to move on. So
being a good bloke has nothing to do with whether you win premierships.
Yeah, well, Gorden Tallis seems to think it does, obviously.
It doesn't. It has nothing to do with it. And, interestingly, Jarryd Hayne is now back in rugby league.
Yes.
So Jarryd Hayne, was obviously released from jail. He was in jail, right?
Yes.
Prison, not jail, prison. There's a difference, apparently. Released from prison after his conviction was quashed.
Yes.
Due to...
His sexual assault conviction was overturned in June this year.
Due to witness tampering or something like that. And, he did speak about wanting to return to rugby league. And so now he'll be a part of the coaching staff during the Pacific Championships. Pacific Cup or Pacific Championship?
Pacific Championship.
But there's a cup and a championship, right?
Yeah, it's all very confusing. Yeah, we'll just go with Pacific Championships for now until we get
it's Pacific Cup Championship. Champion Cups. But he'll be on the coaching staff. Now, he played for Fiji, yeah?
He did play for Fiji. This is his first involvement in rugby league since 2018. Hayne, you mentioned he played for Fiji. He did. He was part of their 2008 World Cup squad, and he was on deck as Fiji stunned New Zealand in the 2017 edition of the tournament. So,
I remember
the World Cup I'm talking about.
Yeah, he was. Obviously he came onto the scene real good. Then he went off the rails, lost all of his spots, went to Fiji and found God, became well behaved, went to America, became misbehaved again. So Jarryd Hayne is kind of who he surrounds himself with is very important.
Yeah, look, I know those charges against him were very serious, obviously, but the fact is that conviction's now been overturned. So I don't have any problem with him taking up a job in the game. And rightly or wrongly, I think it's going to be hard for him to get more employment than just this. I don't really think to be totally honest, and I'm not saying that it's right, I don't think any club is going to hire him. I don't think the media are going to hire him. I think he's going to have trouble getting jobs like that. But people should bear in mind that there is a legal system in this country, and his conviction was overturned, even though the charges were very serious.
You've always got to allow for redemption anyway. I mean, there are some lines, obviously, that there's no such thing as redemption for, but you've got to allow for redemption anyway. As you said, his conviction was overturned. Michael Jennings worked his way back to first grade football. I don't see why Jarryd Hayne can't. Mitchell Pearce was one of our ambassadors. He worked his way back to coaching and mentoring. It depends. As I said, I think it depends a lot on who he hangs around with, who he associates.
Yeah,
with.
I certainly wouldn't. Anyway,
that he I hope Fiji goes well in the Pacific Cup Championship. And whatever. Like Jarryd Hayne's there. I know there's obviously a lot of internet complaints and stuff like that, but it is what it is. People have to be able to come back from things, What is he supposed to do? Someone like Chris Sando's never come back. Ben Barber's, I think he plays in like Koori knockouts.
Yeah, he did play in the Koori knockout, just gone.
There are some people that just can't seem to make it back, and there are some people that can. I don't know what it is. It just is what it is. I always just go back to Matt Lodge came back. And he started out being booed every time he touched the ball to people saying he should be in State of Origin. That was like, everything always starts out bad.
This is the thing. I think they're seeing as Jarryd Hayne's conviction was overturned, was quashed. I think, we need to respect that, and we need to go, look, all right, he's got a job back in the game, and we move forward now. Again, I can't see him getting much more employment than this, if I'm going to be brutally honest. But, the conviction was overturned. So, again, there's a legal system in this country. And we've only got that to go on. We can't really go on anything else.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems with society. Like, people go on the internet instead of what happens in real life. The conviction was overturned, but there'll always be whingers on the internet who will think that what is it called? The jury of the internet is more important, but it's not. It's way less important.
Yes.
And moving along to Ivan Cleary, 4-time premiership winner Ivan Cleary, who Dan recently wrote an article highlighting the fact that you'd have to say he's now surpassed Craig Bellamy as the best coach in the world. As I said last week, I think he's currently, based on his era, if you just take into account his era, he's the currently best modern coach. There's no current coach in the game who is better than him. And him and Phil Gould obviously had a bit of a strange one. Phil Gould sacked Ivan Cleary, then Ivan Cleary coming back got Phil Gould sacked.
I think Ivan Cleary has had the last laugh in that little battle somehow.
Well, Ivan Cleary didn't get Phil Gould sacked, but him coming back to the Panthers is what got Phil Gould and the Panthers, caused Phil Gould and the Panthers to split up. And as we all know, the Panthers' current success is based solely on what Phil Gould did.
Phil Gould will certainly tell you that. I think Ivan Cleary certainly had the last laugh over Phil Gould winning those 4 straight premierships as Panthers coach. Isn't it interesting how everyone talks about how Phil Gould had so much to do with Penrith's success? But isn't it interesting how Penrith have only started having success since Phil Gould actually left the club? Has anyone actually looked at it like that? No. He left in 2019, and then ever since 2020, they've either been in grand finals or won premierships. And Phil Gould's happy to take credit for their success from whomever will give it to him. His friends on Channel 9, whenever Penrith win a premiership, which is very often these days, his friends on Channel 9 will say, "Oh, you started it all, Gus. You did a great job getting it off the ground." and he's more than happy to take all the credit. He tells stories about the current players as if he's still there at Penrith, even though he's now the general manager of another club at the Bulldogs. Ivan Cleary's had the last laugh over him.
Oh, yeah.
This battle is over.
The war is done.
Phil Gould sacked him in 2015 because he said Ivan Cleary looked tired. Excuse me. He's won 4 straight premierships now. I don't think he's looking very tired now, somehow.
That was when the Panthers came 15th as well, yeah. And so Phil Gould blamed the coach. 2019 was when the 2016 Panthers started making it. 2019 they missed it. Phil Gould was chasing Wayne Bennett, apparently, supposedly. And the Panthers signed Ivan Cleary back from the terrible Tigers. And then sacked Phil Gould. Oh, they had a mutual breakup.
As they always say.
It's not you, it's me. And yeah, you'd have to say, like, Ivan Cleary has won the war. Like, Ivan Cleary is the best coach in the current modern NRL. Is it 3 more premierships and he becomes the best coach ever? And based on the last 4 years, I know Craig Gower said 11 in a row is not going to happen, but doesn't matter what happens to the Panthers right now. Like, they just win anyway.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
Cleary only played 11 games this year.
Yeah. That's the thing. You know, the scary thing about this season for me with the Panthers was, for a lot of the year, that they didn't really play that well, and for a lot of the year, again, as you said, for a lot of the year they were without Nathan Cleary, and they still turn up on grand final day and get the job
11
done.
games in the regular season. Obviously, he played the final series, but yeah,
still that's not much of the season.
Yeah.
But interesting quote in Ivan Cleary's book, talking about Phil Gould. He says, "He did so much good for me, but he hurt me too." That was after Cleary confronted Gould with a phone call, and the pair haven't spoken since. I think that was Cleary got his nose out of joint when Gould chased Wayne Bennett, and so no love lost between those two. And as I say, maybe people need to look at this Phil Gould situation differently at Penrith. He left in 2019. Ever since then, they've been going gangbusters. Maybe they're going well because he's not there rather than because of what he did when he was there.
I think last week we talked about, like, when does the Phil Gould influence end? In 10 years are we going to still be talking?
Yeah, the only person in the world who still gets credit for what's happening at an organisation 5 years after he left the organisation.
If they start to go bad, is he going to get the blame as well?
That's the thing. He'll go running once they start going poorly. He'll say, "Oh, it's got nothing to do with me."
Exactly.
Happy to take the credit when they're going well, though.
Speaking of Penrith, Ray Price reckons the current Penrith team wouldn't beat the Parramatta team of 1980. Yes. Is Ray Price a 13-year-old internet kid?
He's not quite 13, I don't think. So, yeah, look, to be honest, I wasn't born when Parramatta won those premierships in the 80s. So
I was just a baby, though.
Yeah. So I didn't see them play when they won those premierships in 81, 82, 83, the 3 in a row, and then in 86. I wasn't born, so I didn't see them play. So it's sort of hard for me to comment on in that regard. But that having been said, you just look at the premierships. Penrith had won 4 premierships in 4 years. That's better than 4 in 6 years. And Penrith have won 4 in a row now. Parramatta only won 3 in a row. Penrith have also done it in a salary cap era as well. There was no salary cap when Parramatta won those premierships. I think that's a big argument in Penrith's column that they've done it in this salary cap era.
This is like a 13-year-old internet kid argument. It happens most in combat sports, I think, but also in other sports where it's like, would this current champion beat this champion from 40 years ago? Would Mike Tyson be able to beat Tyson Fury? You know, like, these people they always leave out the very important point, okay? If you take a team out of any era and embed it in a different era, okay, you have to also take the training mechanisms with them. And that's the only way to compare. So, if you take Penrith back to the 80s, 81, 82, 83, it would mean Penrith would be... Because they always say things like this, like Ray Price probably has these things like, because we were way tougher. we used to smoke the darts before we went out on the field, and all that kind of thing. But Penrith would be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They would be exactly the same. They would all be brickies on the weekend. If you take Parramatta from the 80s and embed them in today, then they would be like the Panthers. They would have they'd all go wrestling at Smeaton Grange. They'd all, with Robert Whittaker.
Yeah.
They'd all have sports scientists and 58 coaches and a salary cap and things like that. Would Parramatta be able to retain who they had in that team?
No.
Without the salary cap?
No.
Because then there's also other things about the rules that were different, right? So they were allowed to punch each other.
Yeah.
So there was also actually there's other things that I've looked at. I've been over the years of being a rugby league fan that people pointed out to me, where things like the ratio of Pacific Islanders in the 80s who played rugby league in Australia was obviously lower.
Yes.
Right? So you have to adjust for everything, and it's such a silly thing to do. It's so easy to say, and it's actually impossible to prove. And all you're doing is just like I said, you're just being a 13-year-old internet kid when you say stuff like that.
I find it's a bit sad when we've got a team that's just won 4 premierships in a row, and only barely a week after that triumph, we've got players from a club who last won a premiership in 1986, beating their chest about how great they were back then and how they're better than the team that's just won 4 in a row. Look, I don't think that that's true, but whether it's true or not, I don't think it really reflects well on them that they're going back to the 1980s. I think that's for other people to judge. It's for historians of the game to judge. It's not for Ray Price to come out and go, we're better than Penrith are now. Our team in the 80s was better than Penrith are now. And like you said, teams would just adapt to the era. If Penrith now were playing in the 80s, they would have adapted to that era. If Parramatta of the 80s were playing now, they would have adapted to this era.
Even if you take, Isaiah Yeo is an awesome example, right? He's a ball-playing back rower, forward leader, runs insane angles that you never saw in the 80s. I was a baby during the Parramatta thing. I've only ever seen highlights of those grand finals. He runs angles that you would never see, offloads the ball in ways that you haven't... he's the best back rower in the competition, you'd have to say, right? Leeds, by example, makes 400,000 tackles a game. Okay. Do you think Ray Price would have been able to... You just take Isaiah Yeo and dump him into a opposing team. Do you think Ray Price, as Isaiah Yeo is now, and dumping him into a team, do you think Ray Price would have been able to handle the angles?
Yeah, well...
It would have bamboozled the teams back then.
Yeah.
But then again, you take Ray Price and dump him into the modern game, he's going to be suspended for 14 weeks a year. That's why it's such a silly thing to say and do ever.
And that's the thing, it's so... Because we're talking about one team that was dominated in the 1980s and talking about another team that's dominating in the 2020s, what else do we go on other than the fact that, one team won 4 in a row, the other team won 3 in a row.
It.
One team won 4 in a row, the other team won 4 in 6 years. One team's done it in a salary cap era, the other team did it when there was no salary cap. What else do we go on other than that? I can't think of any other way of making a decision here.
The reality of it is the players today are so fit. They only have 8 interchanges. How many interchanges did they have in the 80s?
I think it might have been... Well, actually, I think back then what would happen is... Back then, I think maybe once a player went off, I don't think the players came back on back then. I wasn't born at that time, so it's sort of hard for me to... It's hard for me to talk about things like, who was better, Nathan Cleary or Peter Sterling, or, was Mick Cronin, Eric Groth, Steve Ella, Brett Kenny, Ray Price. How did all of them compare to the Penrith team of now? How did they compare to these great Panthers players like, Dylan Edwards and, as I said, Cleary, Jerome Luai. You mentioned Isaiah Yeo. The list goes on and on with Penrith. I could go on and on. But it's really hard to have that conversation when you didn't watch one of the teams. So, all you can go on is premierships. It's like the conversation we had about we're going to talk. Rafael Nadal's announced his retirement, so we're going to talk about the tennis big three a little later in the podcast. What do we judge? All tennis players go after are the 4 majors every year. All rugby league players, NRL players go after is the premiership every year. What else do you judge top flight tennis players on other than majors won? What else do you judge rugby league teams on other than premierships won?
Yeah, it's exactly. It's only you can only go off that. It's 4 in a row versus 3 in a row,
and 4 in a row versus 4 out of 6 years.
There's also less teams as well in the 90.
Yeah, less teams, no salary cap.
I'm looking at just quickly looking at the interchange, right? It's not comparable because the interchange rule was introduced in 1991. Sometime before that, I'm just looking at a foreign breakdown kind of thing. Sometime before that, it was you get 2 guys on the bench that had to have played reserve grade, and they only get to come in if somebody's injured.
Yeah,
it's not comparable.
But I have a feeling that back in the day, back in the I think you said 1991 there. I have a feeling that before 1991, once you went off, well, that's it. You're off for the game. Yeah, because
you can't only come off injury. And then another person comes on. And then in the Super League era, they trialled unlimited interchanges, but it was dumb because one game had 42 changes. And the other thing is you got to realise, no matter what, the players today, they're professional athletes. They have a whole bunch of supplements. They're definitely stronger than all of the players from there. They wrestle better. It's just a stupid thing. I hate it when people do it. If you want to compare the high quality of team, let's face it, who is the best team ever? It was the Dragons in the 55 to 66 era. That's it. 11 in a row.
Yeah. I just, as I said, I find it quite sad that the first thing Ray Price does after a team wins 4 premierships in a row in the 2020s is say that his team from the 1980s was better. Especially seeing as they only won 3 in a row compared to Penrith's 4 in a row.
And they haven't won since then. So they've won a couple of wooden spoons, though.
Well, they were in Spoon Bowl this year.
Yeah, and they almost won another, so why did we just swap around at the beginning? Because, it was only 3 weeks ago we were talking about how it looked like, for a while, for a month, the Western Bears would actually had pipped the PNG team to join the NRL in, when is it, 2026? And it's just come out in the last week that the NRL has rejected their bid.
Yeah, I think it might have been 2027 or 2028. But anyway, that's not happening now, so it doesn't really matter. So you mentioned we were only talking about this a little while ago. So Glenn Quartermain, a journalist from the West Australian, on September 25, that's not even a month ago, wrote, "Confirmation the Bears will join the competition is expected in the week after the NRL Grand Final on October 6. And so we're now more than a week on from the Grand Final, and, now we've got the news that, it's been scrapped, it's not happening. The Western Bears are not coming in. So I feel very sorry for North Sydney Bears supporters. All the talk was that, the Western Bears were coming back. It was going to happen. It was pretty much over the line. And now we learned that, the WA government just haven't been able to meet the funding requirements here.
Yeah, so that's earlier this year it was definitely going to be PNG because the Australian federal government was willing to put $60 million or $600 million into PNG. But then, there was the whole thing about how players didn't want to play there, and then they were willing to build them a compound to live in and their families for the year they're there, and give them all these tax breaks and stuff like that, because the federal government really wanted the PNG team to strengthen ties in that ocean region to combat the growth of China control or whatever, right? Conspiracies, TikTok. But then, only a month ago, it became instead, it was going to be, because of the difficulties around PNG, it was going to be the Bears. Definitely confirmed 100% the Bears. But now it's come out, they're definitely not going to be the Bears because they submitted their application that was rejected because I've heard the two reasons. One is Western Australia wouldn't provide the amount of funding required. And the other one was because the Bears didn't want to pay the licensing fee or the registration fee to the NRL. Now, as I said to you before this podcast, that is a weird thing anyway. I forgot about that. I was only reminded about it when I was reading a news article about it. That the clubs have to pay the NRL to be in the NRL. I don't know how much it is, but if it's less than $12 million, it's weird because you're paying the NRL for the NRL to give you a $12 million grant. Just, it makes no sense.
Yeah. 100%. Look, to be honest though, I agree with the decision. The Western Reds didn't work last time. They folded for a reason. I don't see what's really changed. It's an AFL state. It didn't work last time. I think if something doesn't work, well, you got to look at other alternatives. You can't be going back over old ground when you didn't have success the previous time. Yeah,
and that's so, they got to try new things, as you said, and we can move on to It looks like that PNG team is going to be going ahead.
Yes.
Well, be quiet. I just said, hey, Google. New watch. Bixby, whatever its name is. So, it looks like the PNG team is going to go ahead. And did you watch the...
PM's 13?
Yeah,
it was good, Australia PM's 13 beat PNG PM's 13 42-20 at Port Moresby.
Yep.
And you could see the passion of the fans in the crowd. It was a full house. They were screaming. That's the thing.
Were up, They scored the first.
They scored the first two tries of the game. Yeah, they had a lead early. I like the idea of expanding to a region that's so passionate about the game. We haven't done this before. We haven't explored this option before. Perth and Adelaide, we've been there, done that. It didn't work. They're AFL states. PNG is a rugby league mad country. It's the only country in the world where rugby league is the national sport.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a great idea.
Look, I know there's difficulties around things like, there's fears of safety and all that kind of thing, but when people are so admired, there's less of a fear of safety, right? Because it's going to be things like the rugby league players and their families will live in PNG for a couple of years or 3 years or however long they're there. Plus, there's going to be a bunch of PNG locals, and they're going to be treated like gods. They're going to be known by everyone. And I think the fact that the PNG team was able to put 20 points on, it wasn't obviously Australia A, it was the PM's 13, like a rep team featuring some pretty good goddamn players. It showed that they're going to be a good competitive side in the NRL.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd much rather see, expanding into somewhere like PNG than going into these AFL states. I mean, the Melbourne Storm, quite frankly, they've done nothing for this competition. They've had a lot of success, but nobody cares down there. So it's a waste that they've had all this on-field success because nobody there cares. They've done nothing for the competition. So I'm glad that they're overlooking Perth and they're going to look at expanding into PNG. I'd like to see at some point another team in New Zealand at some stage as well. But I think certainly on the right track with this PNG idea, that's for sure.
It's going to be a cracker, I think. It'll be a good... I reckon really quickly they'll become everyone's second team as well. Because of the rabid nature of the fans and the passion they have. They're not the kind of fans that criticise the other teams. They just love football. So they're going to be pumped to be at every game. They'll very quickly become everyone's second team. Yeah,
and the Australian government are going to provide up to $600 million in support for the bid on the condition that, as you alluded to before, PNG don't allow Chinese police or military forces to be based there. So who would have thought the NRL helping Australia stop Chinese police or military forces from being based in PNG?
It's a bit funny, eh? Rugby league is the solver of political bizarre. There's some signing news.
Yes.
So I got some goss
Oh, yeah?
I think on Wednesday last. It was almost straight after. We had a podcast Tuesday or Wednesday last week.
Tuesday Arvo
Yeah, it was
last
almost
week.
straight after that. I got some goss.
Yeah?
Addo-Carr has already been told on the sly, you're gone and you can negotiate. You know, no agent or player or club will negotiate before the November 1 deadline. But Addo-Carr's been told in advance, like, come November 1, find another club. And there's already clubs that have hooked up the signature.
Well, one thing I would say is I don't see a problem with it if the club he's at want him to go. I mean, if they clearly the Bulldogs don't want him, they want to get rid of him. So what's the problem if his club don't want him? What's the problem with him negotiating and signing early with another club?
And then the Bulldogs signed Marcelo Montoya, which is obviously the Josh Addo-Carr replacement. Now, there is the rumour mill all over the place that Josh Addo-Carr was basically confirmed for the Dragons to go next year. As you said, as you've discussed before, they're waiting till that November 1 so somebody else can sign him for 2026, and then the Bulldogs can say, do you want him early as long as we don't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
But there's been a spanner in the works with the Clint Gutherson also being told by Parramatta. Who's the incoming coach at Parramatta?
Riles.
Yep. He's out the door too. So he's I think he's contracted. He's in the same kind of boat as Josh Addo-Carr. You're free to negotiate from November 1 with other clubs. And then after November 1, when whoever signs Gutho for 2026, we'll be told, do you want him now?
Yeah. A bit of a game of chess going on here.
Plus,
for
there's the Ben Hunt. So there's the Ben Hunt who is definitely gone. He'll be going to the Titans this year. He was meant to, had the same conversation about Ben Hunt last year,
Yeah.
That Ben Hunt will be going to the Titans next year, and it'll be the same kind of thing. They'll sign him for 2026, and the Dragons will say, do you want him now? So the Dragons don't have to pay anything. So there's a bunch of stuff going to happen November 1 to November 3 with agents beginning their negotiations.
Yeah, that's an interesting scoop you got there. I actually think it's a good signing, the Montoya signing. I think when he was at the Bulldogs, they probably didn't get the best out of him the first time around, but I think he did really well at the Warriors, actually, Montoya. I think they got the best out of him, and Addo-Carr's on $550,000 at the Bulldogs. There's no way they'd be paying that for Montoya, so I think it's a smart salary cap savvy signing, that one. They'd be signing him for a fraction of that $550, and he's a very handy pickup. Again, it's not always only about who you buy; it's about at what price.
Yeah.
And I think Montoya is a really smart signing by the Bulldogs. As for Addo-Carr and his links to the Dragons, if he does go to the Dragons, it'll be a good pickup for them. But they've just got to, keep his head in the right space.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a difficult one, because even Cameron Ciraldo, who's arguably one of the most disciplined coaches in the NRL, was unable to keep Josh Addo-Carr in line. It's a bit of a hard one, And
so Shane Flanagan's obviously going to lay down the law with him from day one.
But was he able to keep? He had Todd Carney at the Sharks, right? Shane Flanagan had Todd Carney, and he wasn't able to keep him in line. It's when you look at these coaches and the history of them, like who's been able to keep Josh Addo-Carr fully in line? Craig Bellamy.
Yeah, that's right. Addo-Carr, it's a gamble. It's a real gamble. But maybe the Dragons view it as a gamble worth taking.
They need
from
to
their
replace
point of view.
Max. Well, they've already replaced him with Valentine Holmes. That's the other thing. So I think they need a more senior fullback, and I think actually Gutherson might be a better signing for them, to be honest.
I guess that they're just hoping that he can, stay on the straight and narrow, and if he can, well, he's a finisher, he's a match winner, he's a try scorer. And that's that's a player the Dragons can absolutely do with, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, I think they let go of Rafael Nadal as well.
Well, they actually tried to do a swap deal with the Bulldogs, Rafael for Addo-Carr, and the Bulldogs said, no, sorry.
So it's a bit of a... Dragons were going to be an interesting team next year. I'm waiting to see what happens, but everybody needs halves. It's still, like, everybody needs it. The Dragons need halves. If they're going to let Ben Hunt go, who do they have? They got no halves. Bulldogs really need halves. Everybody needs halves. So all this, like, backline movement, like, there's fullbacks, wings, centres all off contract moving around, and Ben Hunt is the only half that looks like he's moving anywhere.
What would you have kept Ben Hunt for another year, or are you happy to see him?
Depends on who's there, man. Like, I don't know who's there.
That's the thing. You need another option there. You need someone better than him in that spot, don't you? Before you move him on.
Yeah, well, unless they've got someone in mind, or there's someone in the juniors. I don't know. I don't know enough about the juniors and stuff, but that's going to be the danger. They're going to let go of their senior half and not have a half.
So is Flanagan maybe in the... We talked about the Bulldogs this year, how because they were deficient in certain areas, like, well, the halfback spot, where we had Hutchison there and then Sexton, the Bulldogs sort of found a different way to play the game this year. And is Flanagan doing the same thing here? Is he going, well, if we're going to let Ben Hunt go now, I need to sort of compensate for that by going hard on outside backs like Valentine Holmes and Josh Addo-Carr if they get him. Yeah. Maybe they want to play a different way.
Maybe they can go Addo-Carr and Gutherson. So they'll have Sloan, Gutherson, Addo-Carr. Who else is in the back line? Valentine, Holmes. That's not a bad back line, actually.
But I guess Flanagan's probably playing the long game. He's going, well, it can't all come together in 1 year. Yeah. We can piece some of it together. It's like assembling an NRL roster with the salary cap the way it is. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, well, you can't put all the pieces in place at once. You've got to do it gradually, do it over time.
As we talked about, it's taken 3 years for Phil Gould to rebuild the Broncos roster. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting in 2 weeks. Going to give us a lot of news to talk about. Yes. Finally, with Rugby League, only managed to publish Dan's article yesterday about Kane Cornes and his ridiculous statements about Rugby League. Yes. After that abysmal grand final, absolutely terrible grand final, in the AFL, in which Sydney Swans didn't even turn up to play. The Sydney Swans under 18s turned up or something. Yes.
Under 8s.
Kane Cornes had a criticism of the Rugby League grand final, which was, although it wasn't the most spectacular game ever, it was actually a good game of Rugby League.
Yeah, well, as you've labelled him this before, this is the AFL's media hitman at it again, doing the AFL's dirty work in the media. The AFL won't do it themselves, so they've just make sure that Kane Cornes does it for them. And
Kane Cornes will criticise players, clubs, coaches,
but never the AFL. Yeah,
the AFL is perfect.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you write an article about another sport's grand final after what the AFL dished up? Like anything. Yeah. The only article should be, man, the AFL really needs to learn from the NRL about how to run a grand final. Get 2 teams that'll actually try.
Yeah. The quote from Cornes was, the NRL Grand Final, it's just a shocking sport. I've said this for a while now. Now, as you said, that's pretty rich considering what the AFL dished up on Grand Final day this year. That game was over at half-time. The Brisbane Lions led by 46 points at half-time. They went on and thrashed the Swans by 60 points. Not only did they thrash them, pundits like Sam Newman and Matthew Lloyd even said that the Swans... Well, Sam Newman said that they didn't try, and then Matthew Lloyd actually backed that up with video evidence, went through numerous examples of Swans players not going hard at the ball. So he says the NRL or Rugby League's a shocking sport. Well, if we go on the grand finals in the 2 codes, if Rugby League's a shocking sport... Well, what does that make the AFL?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No AFL reporter should be writing any articles for the next year about criticising any... What they're hoping for is a much worse grand final in some sport that they can write about and say, I know AFL was bad, but at least we're not. Insert sport here.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the NRL grand final, it wasn't the best grand final. It wasn't... Darren Albert scoring to win in 1997. It wasn't Jonathan Thurston kicking that field goal to win it in 2015. It wasn't Nathan Cleary winning it for Penrith in 2023. In the last 18 minutes, I think it was. Yeah. But it was, it was a war of attrition. It was a game of chess. It was two teams trying to outlast one another. And it was only an 8-point margin, and the result wasn't clear until the very dying stages where we knew Melbourne couldn't score twice.
Yeah, I think when we were watching it, it was about 5 minutes to go where we were like, all right, you'd have to say now. That's it, 5 minutes to go.
As opposed to at half-time in the AFL grand
when
final.
there's 10 minutes to go, we were like, oh, yeah, I don't think Melbourne can do it. But, if they were to score... It can really change the game if they get that score in the last 10 minutes. If they had a score with 9 minutes to go, it could have changed a lot. But then with 5 minutes to go, we're like, well, they're not going to score twice.
Yeah. And I mean, Sam Newman went as far as to say the Swans refused to try, labelled them a disgrace, and said they should be censured by the AFL for taking the piss out of this competition. Yeah, I think that's how hard he went, and it's hard to argue with him.
The rugby league is a shocking sport, and their grand final was boring. Thanks, Kane Cornes, doofus.
and what about Kane Cornes lashes out at the NRL? If we revisit what Western Bulldogs legend Luke Darcy said about him, maybe he needs to have a bit of a look at himself before he's slinging mud at other codes. Back in April, Luke Darcy told Kane Cornes that, quote, he was more mean-spirited and nasty to people than anyone in the history of our industry. This is the reputation that Kane Cornes has among his AFL peers. So, look who's talking here. Maybe he should spend some time repairing his own reputation before having a crack at other codes.
He's only critical. That's his thing. He's only critical. Clubs, sport.
He never gives credit to anybody for anything. He just attacks people.
There's a difference
all the time.
between constructive criticism and criticism, right? But Kane Cornes doesn't know that. Yeah, well, good on him. He can continue. All he did was make himself look like a fool. That's it for Rugby League for the week. We'll definitely have more stuff next week.
Pacific Championships getting underway on Friday night.
We touched on the India versus Australia series.
Yes.
Australia is already making excuses.
Yes.
So Cameron Green's been ruled out through injury for the whole summer.
That's right.
And Steve Smith says he won't be opening, which is a good thing, I think, because Steve Smith is not an opener no matter what. How much they tried to convert him to an opener in the last 3 years of his career, he's just not an opener. He's a 3 or a 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the stats back that up, and I'll get to that in a second. But Cameron Green was confirmed on Monday he'd undergo surgery on a stress fracture in his back. He'll miss 6 months of cricket. So with Cameron Green going out of the middle order, he was at number 4. Well, it makes sense for Steve Smith to drop back down to number 4. I can give you the numbers. Steve Smith averages 61.5 batting at number 4 in Test cricket. As an opener, he only averaged less than half of that, 28.5. So it makes complete sense for Steve Smith to go back to number 4. Mm-hmm. As you just said before, I don't know why he ever opened. He's not an opener. He's a middle order batsman in Test cricket. Pretty silly to open the batting, but anyway, he's going to go back into his favoured position now. That makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, now that Steve Smith's moving back to number 4, well, that opens up a slot with Usman Khawaja opening the batting. Now, he opened with David Warner, obviously. David Warner now retired. Steve Smith had a go there. He's moving now. So now we go, well, who opens with Usman Khawaja? Now, they are talking about Marcus Harris and Cameron Bancroft as potential candidates. Now, look, while those two have a lot of Sheffield Shield runs, the issue with those two is they're unproven performers in Test cricket. Marcus Harris averages only 25 in Tests, Cameron Bancroft only 26. So, I don't know. They've tried with these two before. It hasn't worked. I sort of feel like they should be looking at other alternatives.
Yeah, but who is there?
Yeah, well, I guess that's the issue at the moment, isn't it?
Well, Cameron Bancroft... Has he come back and played for Australia yet? We were talking about it last year. Like, he was the best in the Sheffield Shield and couldn't get a Australian match no matter what.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he has been back since that. We all know the infamous ball tampering ban. He has been back in the team since then. Yeah, but his last test, actually, was the 14th of August 2019 against England.
Yeah,
but that is after the ban. So he has been back.
There was a whole
since the
thing
ban.
about it, right? Where last year, when David Warner was retiring, or earlier this year, and Cameron Bancroft was the best batsman opener in the Sheffield Shield, and still wouldn't get a look in. And we discussed there's got to be something else going on because he had played again since Sandpapergate. But yeah, who else is there? I don't know. I don't know enough about lower grade cricket to suggest anyone.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be Cameron Bancroft though, because he can't get a look in since 2019, no matter how well he goes in lower grades.
Yeah, look, it's a real shame that Will Pukovski had to retire following medical advice due to recurrent concussions. A very talented batsman. I would have thought he would have been somebody you'd be looking to, but yeah, very unfortunate that he's had to retire so young. I think he would have been a good candidate. But yeah, without him, you really are scraping the barrel there. Hopefully they can come up with a solution.
Just put Glenn Maxwell in. He can do anything. Don't put Glenn Maxwell in. That's not serious, internet. Don't take that as serious. I've got no idea who they can put. You know, last year it was Cameron Bancroft was the best option. It wasn't the best, he wasn't an option that you really wanted because of his numbers, but he was the best option out of what we have. And now I don't know. I just don't know. Who else is coming through? Who else is showing good numbers in Test cricket as well?
It's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. So
we'll have to see what happens. It's only a month and a half.
Oh, yeah, November 22, that first test against India. So
a month and a week. We've got until then to find out, and we'll have to see. But it's unfortunate that we don't have anyone.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a weak spot, one that India's opening bowlers will definitely be rubbing their hands together at. And India, of course, have vastly improved their fast bowling stocks in Test cricket, and that's a lot of the reason why they've been able to win out here the last two series out here is that improvement in their fast bowling stocks. Prior to those two series, that they really only had spin bowling options. You need good pace bowlers to win Test series in Australia on these pace bowler friendly wickets out here, and India's certainly improved in that area. So and look, I think that's where Australia are vulnerable. That opening spot with Khawaja, we don't even know that the two leading candidates, as we've said, don't have good numbers in Test cricket. So whether they go with one of those two or whether they go for someone else, it could be a weak spot for Australia. Further to that, Labuschagne and Steve Smith haven't had the best time of it in the last couple of years now. They're not what they were. They haven't been performing to their potential the last couple of years, as great as they both are.
Yeah.
So if India know that if they can get that, a lot's going to be hinging on Usman Khawaja in this series, I really feel like. Because if India can get that early wicket of that other opening batsman and then get into Labuschagne and Smith early, could be real trouble for Australia's batting lineup.
We've been waiting for a couple of years for Steve Smith to play himself back into form. And India are on fire, so it's going to be quite. So November 22nd, you said? We'll have it on in the office.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a huge series. As I said before, the first time since 91-92 that these two teams have contested a 5-test series. So
it's 5. I'm glad it's 5 tests.
Well, I'd rather have that than have 3 or 4 and another lowly opponent coming out.
4 is the dumbest.
Yeah, it makes more sense to play 5 against them than play 3 against them and 2 against a minnow nation.
Are they doing ODIs and T20s and all that?
Yeah, so there's a series before that. They're playing Pakistan in ODIs and T20I series. So, I don't think many people really care about those series, but obviously that'll be a little entree before this Australia-India Test series.
England is currently playing Pakistan now in tests.
Yes, they are, and that might be a little segue into our next item. England made an extraordinary 823 in the first test against Pakistan. quite extraordinary. Pakistan scored 556 in their first innings and lost by an innings and 47 runs. How you score 556 and lose by an innings is just beyond me. Quite staggering.
Wow.
Yeah, obviously a lot of criticism about how batting friendly that pitch was, but anyway, England smashing some records with that total of 823. It's actually the first time in Test history a side have conceded 500 in the first innings and then gone on to win by an innings.
Yeah, it's It's beyond ridiculous. Pakistan's all over the shop, man. You never know what they're going to do in their next match.
Yeah, and that total of 823 for 7 declared, that's the fourth highest total in Test history and only the fourth time a team has passed 800 in Test cricket. It's England's highest score since the Second World War.
Wow.
Harry Brook made 317 and Joe Root made 262. They were the chief destroyers with the bat for England.
So there's Google's giving Pakistan a 31% chance of winning in the next test, which is scheduled.
I think that starts later today. We're recording on
4 p.m.
Yeah, we're recording on Tuesday morning. That match starts on Tuesday afternoon our time.
31% chance of winning. I wouldn't. Yeah, that's also only because England's been so bad recently as well.
I tell you what, as much as we bag England and we want England to fail at every possible opportunity in cricket, that's a really good win for them to do that on Pakistan soil, on a road of a pitch, to win that test. And everyone will talk about that batting score, but, to bowl Pakistan out twice on that road of a pitch in Pakistan, that's a great effort by England's bowling attack.
And now we can finally say that England are over that Johnny Bairstow stumping.
About time, eh?
It's only taken 3 years. Moving on to tennis, there's quite a few tennis things happening because the year is about to start. Only a couple of months away from the year starting, which is funny because, man, this year's gone quick. Rafael Nadal announced, as expected, that he'd be retiring from tennis. When was that? It was Saturday, yeah.
When it was announced,
Yeah.
it was actually announced on Thursday night our time.
I
So
saw it on Saturday.
yeah, I wrote my last column on Thursday, and I went, oh, if only this had happened a day earlier, I would have written about it. But I will write about this tomorrow because obviously an icon of the sport and
second best player that ever lived.
Yes, 100%. And, I think for a lot of his career, he was in Roger Federer's shadow, but he will, as we've talked about it with the NRL coaches and NRL teams, what are these players judged on if it's not the 4 big trophies they go after every year? And seeing as Rafael Nadal won 22 majors to Roger Federer's 20, well, he's got to be regarded as a better player, in my opinion. I have to say it. And that's how he's going to go down. He'll go down as the second best player in history behind Novak Djokovic, in my book.
Yeah, and it was a great rivalry before Djokovic came,
Yeah. It's like Djokovic is viewed as the one who spoiled the party and came along and crashed the Nadal-Federer party.
Exactly, and then it became Nadal and Federer versus Djokovic.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that's part of the reason why Djokovic is widely disliked among not just tennis fans but sports fans around the globe, is that he's come along, he's almost like this unwanted third guest at the party.
Yeah.
And that, I think if he had to come along at a different time, things would have been very different. I think that's probably the chief reason he is so disliked. But just, in terms of Nadal, the other thing, obviously, the main thing he's going to be remembered for is his staggering record at the French Open. 14 French Open titles. Just extraordinary. When you think that a legend like Pete Sampras, who has been forgotten about with the 3 who've gone past him. Now, Pete Sampras, a legend of that stature, won 14 majors in his career. Nadal won 14 majors at one tournament at the French Open. So Nadal at one tournament did the same as Pete Sampras across the 4 majors over his career, a legend like Pete Sampras. it's just an extraordinary record that Nadal has at the French Open. I think I would say about Nadal is he only played one major after the 2023 Australian Open, had injury disruptions. That was the time I think that he should have exited. I think it's gone on a bit too long. He was always going to come back and play that 2023 Australian Open after he had that great win at the tournament in 2022. We'll all remember that great comeback win against Daniil Medvedev in that final. It was just extraordinary. But he should never have taken the court at the French Open this year against Alexander Zverev. Definitely. With so little play under his belt, he was always going to get hammered by Zverev, and he lost that match in straight sets. I really wish he hadn't have played that match. But anyway, that 112-4 win-loss record at the French Open over his career, it would have been 112-3 if he hadn't have played against Zverev. Yeah. But anyway, what a great career. He's the Don Bradman of the French Open. It's unbelievable.
One of the things that he's also got over Roger Federer is he actually won two... What is it? He won two...
Every major twice, at least twice.
Yeah,
yes.
Federer only has one, I think.
French Open, yes. Yeah, that's right.
He's got a win in the Olympics. He's got Davis Cup wins. Absolute champion of a person and amazing.
Yeah. Player. You talk about the Davis Cup. Now, fitting that he's going to end his career at the Davis Cup. That'll be his final tournament. His Davis Cup singles record is extraordinary. He lost his first ever singles match at the Davis Cup. Since then, he's won 29 in a row since. So he's 29-1 in career Davis Cup singles matches. So I think appropriate that the curtain will come down at the Davis Cup Final 8. Australia will be competing in that as well. And I think, look, we do criticise Novak Djokovic. We have criticised Novak Djokovic a lot on this podcast, but I think we do have to give him some credit here. Serbia are not even in this Final 8 at the Davis Cup, and he said he plans to attend the Davis Cup finals to bid farewell to his great rival Nadal. So he's going to go there to bid farewell to Nadal. I think that shows what a class act Djokovic is. I think we've got to give credit where it's due there. Yeah. He's Serbia not even in that event, and he's going to travel there to bid farewell to his great rival.
Still trying to make friends.
Yeah, I know. I did think that, but I thought, look, I'm going to try and be positive here and give the guy a bit of credit.
Remember Djokovic, Nadal said earlier this year he's not even friends with Roger Federer.
Yeah. We're not like Kane Cornes, though. We will give credit where it's due on this podcast.
Great. I like how Djokovic travels around the world and watches sport, actually. It's really cool. He's often at different sporting events. He should go to the UFC more. Champion, as I said, Rafael Nadal, champion person, champion player. Second best player that ever lived.
And sad to see him go, but I think he has made the right decision.
Yeah,
100%. We don't, like you've said before, we don't like seeing athletes go on too long and you know,
they
slightly tarnish
to young people. That's the thing.
I mean, I'm not going to say he's ruined his legacy, but I take your point. Like, he has gone on too long.
Yeah.
We don't want to see him take the court and just be a participant against someone like Zverev and lose in straight sets in the first round of the French Open. We want to remember him for the great champion he was at the French Open, winning it 14 times. Not for the player who went out against Zverev in the first round.
He hasn't ruined his legacy. If he kept going, he would...
No, well, at least the way I see it is he only played in one major that he shouldn't have played in. Yeah, it's only one. If he just hadn't have played in that, I think it would have been a well-timed retirement. But, I mean, there's other players like Andy Murray who goes on many years after he should have retired. So if you compare him to someone like that, well, you know, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Okay, and then my enemy Jannik Sinner.
Yes.
Now, the one thing I hate is cheating. WADA has appealed his ruling.
Yes.
Which is, I think, so WADA is they fold to media and internet pressure, actually. They do try to be more than they are. They're just a doping authority, right? They don't need to be popular amongst fans.
Yeah.
But I think it's good that they've appealed the doping ruling because Jannik Sinner did get off, basically. And he went on to win... What did he win this year?
Won the Australian Open, won the US Open.
Yeah, he won the US Open recently.
So won two majors this year.
And both of those have asterisks next to their name as far as I'm concerned. So WADA's appealed his ruling?
Yes, they have. No date has been set for the hearing, but this is going to put a bit of a cloud over Jannik Sinner because WADA is seeking a ban of between 1 and 2 years for Sinner. So that's very interesting. Watch this space here.
He's rich and he can afford a really good lawyer. I wonder if it'll be retroactively applied.
Yeah, it says to be applied from the date of a CAS ruling, which is Court of Arbitration for Sport ruling. So they've launched the appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So that ban, by the sounds of it, will come into effect when that hearing is set. From then on, it'll be 1 or 2 years from then on.
Yeah, so they're not seeking a disqualification of any results. That means...
No.
Because that's the biggest... what's it called? ATP. If they were seeking a retroactive ban, the ATP would fully help to fund the case as well, because they don't want Grand Slam stripped. They just
not a good look. They don't want to end up like the Tour de France, which has 7 years of no winner because of Lance Armstrong.
Exactly. So that means he won't be able to compete for 2 years, I guess, 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. So no, he's not going to lose his Grand Slam titles, but
they'll have an asterisk next to him as far as I'm concerned.
But that's the problem, isn't it? It's sort of like it doesn't really matter whether they strip them or not. It just leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And you just can't help but feel like they are tarnished victories now. He's going to have to... So he's probably not sleeping the best at the moment, Jannik Sinner, with the possibility of a 1 to 2 year ban hanging over his head at the moment.
Well, I actually hope they win. And so then more tennis. Conor McGregor of tennis.
Yes.
Nick Kyrgios is expected to play at the Australian Open. Yeah, Conor McGregor was meant to fight in June.
Yeah.
Right. I can't see it happening. Did Nick Kyrgios make a statement saying he was going to play, or is it just internet?
He's spoken to Code Sports, News Corp Code Sports, on Monday, and he's
Telegraph for more money.
Yeah. And he says he'll be back on tour in December. So he's confirmed he'll end his time in the tennis wilderness at the World Tennis League event in Abu Dhabi in December. So he's confirmed he's going to play in that. So obviously, I'd say he's going to play in that with a view to playing in the Australian Open. And while there wasn't comment from him on the Australian Open, but Australian Open boss Craig Tiley said last week he expects Kyrgios to play at the Aussie Open. I don't think he should come back. I don't think he's put enough work in. This is... like what we were saying about Nadal. Nadal came back when he shouldn't have at that French Open. Should have left it where it was. And, of course, I'm not comparing Nick Kyrgios to Nadal for one moment.
Yes, internet.
But he hasn't played in a major since the 2022 US Open. That's 2 years of not playing in a major. And what, he thinks he can just come back with one event at Abu Dhabi in December and then he's going to be cherry ripe for the Australian Open in January? It's just not going to happen. If he comes back, he's not going to do anything at the Australian Open. I really think that, look, to be honest, we got to be honest on this podcast. I don't like Nick Kyrgios. I don't care about Nick Kyrgios tarnishing his legacy because I'm not a fan of Nick Kyrgios. But if I put that to one side for a moment, I really don't think he should come back. He should retire now. He retires in general, and he would retire as an underachiever. But, he did make that 2022 Wimbledon final against Novak Djokovic, which he lost. But if he comes back, he's not going to do anything. And he doesn't put the work in. So what's the point? He should stay in what really looks like a pseudo-retirement.
Yeah, he shouldn't come back. No one actually wants to see... Well, you want to see him for the memes, right? That's what the kids today say. These young whippersnappers. You want him... No, sorry. In there for the lols. But he's not going to do anything. He'll probably get smoked in the first round. Doesn't matter who it is. He's not going to get seeded.
And he might win the first round, but he'd go out second round.
He's going to come up against someone who's actually good and puts the work in and tries. And to be honest, for me, it's also he's taking the spot of someone. He would be taking the spot of someone who actually deserves to be there.
And who wants to be there and who has put in the hard work. He's had serious knee and wrist injuries the last couple of years. That's why he hasn't played at a major since the 2022 US Open. I'll tell you what, we have had a lot to say about Novak Djokovic in our time of doing this podcast. But I'm so glad Novak Djokovic won that Wimbledon final in 2022. Can you imagine if Nick Kyrgios had won that? We'd never hear the end of it. He'd be talking about it every week, every other week if he had won that tournament.
Podcast and Billboard.
I thank Novak Djokovic for the rest of eternity for winning that Wimbledon final.
So Nick Kyrgios apparently wants to come back to get a Grand Slam and shut the haters up.
Yeah, I can't see that happening.
Yeah, do you think he's gonna beat Carlos Alcaraz or Dopey Sinner? No.
And Djokovic is still there, a contender.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
I wouldn't write him off yet.
He's had slumps before.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you wouldn't definitively say that Djokovic won't win another major. I mean, his record at the Australian Open's so good. He's always a chance of winning that. But anyway,
I can't see Nick Kyrgios beating Novak Djokovic. You know,
no. So, if they played tomorrow, Djokovic wins.
Yeah, no matter where they end up, if they were to play against each other, no way Nick Kyrgios is going to beat him. So Nick Kyrgios. Nick Kyrgios' best friend, Bernard Tomic, is still playing tennis.
Yes.
I guess he's not just sitting around and counting his millions. And he recently broke a record that he previously set.
Yeah, so
it was embarrassing enough to have this record, and he's broken it.
So Tomic lost the shortest ever ATP Challenger final on record, falling in straight sets to America's Lerner Tien. If you can believe it, the match only lasted 39 minutes. Tomic lost 6-love, 6-1 in Connecticut. It was pointed out by someone on Twitter, ironically, that Tomic also recorded the quickest ATP Tour loss a decade ago. Remarkably, that was by the same score back in 2014. So he's got the record for the quickest loss on the ATP Tour and the quickest ATP Challenger final. So, seriously?
Yeah, well, at least he made a final. I think that's what his takeaway was.
6-love, 6-1. Yeah. Unbelievable.
I think that was what his takeaway was. Like, at least I made a final. But I don't even know it's still playing. His ranking went up too, right?
It was actually the quickest final loss in ATP Challenger history. Yeah, that's right. You talk about his ranking; it's now gone up to 207th in the world for Bernard Tomic. One thing I would say is Nick Kyrgios responded to this on Twitter with a laughing emoji. This is just he just continually, and I know Bernard Tomic is not someone to be sympathising with, but you get my point here. Yeah. Nick Kyrgios is always the first one to pile onto people who suffer some sort of misfortune. You can see why we just give it to Nick Kyrgios. He just keeps giving us reasons to give it to him.
Just be quiet, and why don't you go practice some tennis? If you want to come back, go practice some tennis.
Why does he always have to reduce himself to these pathetic displays on social media?
People even famous people are just bullies. That's the thing.
I think, to be honest, you know, and look, Tomic, I don't have any time for Tomic, but I think that's really to just laugh at a guy like that who's, you know, he's obviously Bernard Tomic hasn't had the best time of it in the last 5 years or so, maybe longer.
Yeah, since he came on.
But it's just so typical of Nick Kyrgios to be the one to just pile on and do a laughing face emoji.
He's just an internet bully, man.
That is bullying, isn't it?
That's what he is. He's an internet bully.
He's like a child. He's like a school kid.
It's another one of those guys that would never, even though he's famous, he'd never do it in real life. You know, that's the thing. He would never do it in real life. There are many. Just because people are famous doesn't mean they're any different to just people, right? You know, you talk about the internet anonymity, where the people will be cowards and say stuff on the internet, and then they won't do it in real life, and they hide behind the anonymity. But Nick Kyrgios would never say anything bad to Bernard Tomic in real life. There was a thing in jiu-jitsu a few years ago, because everybody hates Gorden Ryan, the greatest no-gi grappler of all time, right? Everybody hates him. And he had a big back and forth on the internet with this guy, Andre Galvao, who's one of the greatest of all times. It's back and forth online. These guys are fighters. Or, some people say BJJ is in a fight, but they're fighters, right? And Andre Galvao actually, he did MMA and stuff. And after an event once, one of Gorden Ryan's teammates beat one of Andre Galvao's teammates. And then Gorden Ryan went up to shake his hand, as you do, the coaches shake his hand, and Andre Galvao gave him the finger. So Andre Galvao moved their feud from the internet to real life. And this is an example of people who would do stuff in real life, right? They'll actually do it. And then afterwards, Andre Galvao was chasing Gorden Ryan down. They had a big argument, and then Gorden Ryan slapped him, like a full bitch slap. And Galvao did nothing, which was kind of weird, right? He actually did nothing. He didn't follow it through. But people did jump in the way and break up any fight that happened. But these guys will follow it up in real life. And I have a lot more respect for them, even though Gordon Ryan is a total douchebag. And I would tell him so in real life. And Andre Galvao, I dislike a lot of the things he says and does in jiu-jitsu. But they will follow it up in real life. Nick Kyrgios won't. And one day, seriously, even if you're famous, one day you're going to say something to the wrong people. If Nick Kyrgios bagged Gordon Ryan on the internet and pushed it so hard, and then they encountered each other in real life, Gordon Ryan will back that up. But that's how you know Nick Kyrgios is just a bully, because he wouldn't talk crap about Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor tried to bash Machine Gun Kelly at some VMA awards or something like that. Nothing's going to hold him back. Yeah. So Nick Kyrgios is just a cowardly internet bully who says this stuff and does this stuff and does the pile on and will never back it up.
So Nick Kyrgios has kicked somebody who's down with this laughing emoji. He's kicked Bernard Tomic while he's down. That's just a pathetic display as far as I'm concerned from Nick Kyrgios. It's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And can I just thank Novak Djokovic one more time for winning that Wimbledon final in 2022 and making sure Nick Kyrgios 100%. Didn't win that final? Because if Nick Kyrgios had won that final, we would never have heard the end of it for the rest of eternity.
Yeah, exactly. He'd fully probably pay people with his millions of dollars to keep it going on the internet forever. Just even after he dies. Just an auto post forever.
Yes. I will forever give Novak Djokovic credit for winning that Wimbledon final. And thank God for Novak Djokovic. That's all I'm going to say.
So that's it for the week. Next week we're going to have a lot to talk about with the Pacific Championship Cup, Champion Cup, whatever the hell it is. The two competitions that are currently going on. So what did you say? Australia kicks it off on Friday.
Yes, that's right.
And when is New Zealand playing?
So it's Australia and Tonga on Friday night.
Yep.
Fiji, PNG on Saturday night. I think New Zealand are just having the first week off. Yeah. Everybody has a week off. New Zealand will open their campaign against Australia on the 27th of October, so that'll be the following week.
And they haven't made the mistake this year that they did last year where New Zealand had to play Australia 2 weeks in a row, which was stupid.
So I think they've fixed up the scheduling a bit. They've actually so Australia will have week 3 off. I think they've done that on purpose to make sure that they know Australia are going to be in the final. Well, you'd think so, surely. And so they're making sure that we don't have that farcical scenario again of New Zealand playing Australia the week before the final and then playing each other in the final again.
So Fiji and PNG are playing on Saturday? Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. Yes, Saturday in Suva.
Yep.
Saturday night.
Yeah, and then the finals is on the 10th of November.
That's right, yeah.
Oh, it's a double header at Combank. Oh, that's awesome.
That'll be Sunday the 10th of November, yeah.
I wonder if I could get tickets to that, just because it'd be fun.
Yeah, that'll be alright, wouldn't it?
Alright then, well, have a good weekend, Dan. Rest of the week. It's only Tuesday. Oh my god, it's only Tuesday. Oh.
Thanks, John.
And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a good week, mate. We'll see you then.